A risky move by the Ravens and Eric DeCosta turned into a genius one over the weekend. We talk about that. Draft week for the Ravens, mock draft Monday, and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. So if you're a video watcher, you like to watch on YouTube, be sure you hit the like and subscribe button. If you're an audio listener, you like to listen in audio form, be sure to follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcast for 5 days a week. And we are the same show, both audio and video. So every Monday through Friday, we got Ravens coverage for you. And we are going to have plenty of draft coverage coming your way this week. We will have live shows after each day of the draft. Day 1, late night. Day 2, late night. Day 3, in the afternoon. We'll have bonus episodes on both Saturday and Sunday. We have so much draft content coming your way. I'm super excited. Happy draft week, everybody. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Draft week always sneaks up on you. If you've been listening to me here on the show, I've been only talking about it for the past 6 weeks. I've been saying, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. We're officially here. Thursday night marks night 1 of the draft. The Ravens have 11 picks. We're going to be talking about in the second and third parts of the show how important the draft is for the Ravens, how I think Eric DeCosta and the Ravens are in a very good spot. And to me, Eric DeCosta really can't stop winning because there's so many different ways the Ravens could go with this, and that is the best case scenario for the Ravens team. But in the first segment, a risky move that Eric DeCosta and the Ravens made actually turned into a genius one over the weekend. We haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, so let's dive into it. Darius Washington has been a polarizing name throughout really the Ravens fan base, the Ravens team, ever since he signed as an undrafted free agent on TCU a couple of years ago. Really stepped up last season after dealing with injuries his first couple of years. The potential was always there for Darius. If you've been listening to me on Locked On Ravens back during that whole draft process, I wanted Darius in the 3rd round, but he fell out of the draft due to his size. The Ravens ended up taking a flyer on him. He makes the team. Again, goes through some injuries, but he turned into a very solid defender for the Ravens last season in that safety spot when the Ravens needed him to be one. He was a restricted free agent during this offseason here, and the Ravens made a bit of a risky move by putting a essentially right of first refusal tag on him, so there wasn't any tender pick attached. So for those that don't know how the restricted free agency tags work, or just, for me, just giving a little crash course quickly, with the restricted free agent, you can put a certain level of a tender on a guy. So first round tender means if a player signs an offer sheet with an opposing team and that team ends up signing him, the Ravens don't match it, the Ravens would have gotten a first-round pick. Let's just use Darius. If Darius had gotten the first-round tender, Colts sign Darius to an offer sheet, Ravens don't match, Colts give the Ravens a first-round pick. Same thing with a second-round tender, late-round tender. The Ravens decided to not do any of that and just give him right of first refusal, which means if he signed an offer sheet with a team and the Ravens said, okay, that's too much for us, go ahead and go to Indianapolis, where it's using the Colts as the example, the Ravens would have gotten no compensation back. The reason they did that was because, obviously, for each round you go down or for each level of tender you go down, it is less money, assuming the tender is actually signed by the player. So Darius, that right of first refusal tender, $3.26 million. Well, the big news and the trending news that Darius Washington did not sign an offer sheet with the team. The deadline was Friday. So the only way that he can play in 2025 is if he signs that Ravens tender for $3.26 million, extending his Ravens tenure. There you go. We got tenure and tender in the same conversation here. This to me is perfect for Baltimore. There was a little bit of a risk because, usually when there's draft compensation attached to the tender, teams are more wary to go after a guy, especially when they know that, hey, we're going to have to sign the guy to a deal and give up a draft pick. Back when Lamar Jackson's whole contract situation happened and the whole franchise tag, exclusive, non-exclusive stuff that, I honestly kind of want to block out of my brain because of how exhausting that offseason was. Seems like we talked about that contract every day for a year straight. It's what it felt like. there was a lot of conversation about, hey, you had to pay Lamar Jackson, give up those 2 first-round picks. It's not the exact same thing, but it is similar. And Darius Washington, look, he is more than a $3.26 million player, in my opinion. This is a win for the Ravens. Look, Darius gets a nice little pay bump, too. It's a nice up in pay for Darius as well. But I think for Darius, he has had one good year. There have been some differing opinions on Darius, throughout the fan base, it feels like, about just how valuable he is. I personally think he's very valuable. I think he's a heck of a player. But the Ravens, I feel like, want to use him in the nickel, and if they have to at the safety spot. I mean, he found a home at safety, but I still feel like they like him in the nickel, and the Ravens right now do not have a nickel corner. They cut Arthur Millette. Obviously, you can put Marlon in the slot and feel good about it, but I'm interested to see how they want to use Marlon this season, because they could certainly do that, and then I'd be totally fine with it. But Darius at least gives you that flexibility, and what we'll get to a little bit in the second and third parts of the show is how the Ravens could address the safety and corner position in the draft based off of Darius. But this is great news for Baltimore, and it turns into a genius one for Eric DeCosta, because, again, there was a gamble involved of a team coming in, seeing what Darius did last season, which, by the way, he was really, really good. He was asked essentially thrown into spot start duty because the Ravens had nothing else. They didn't just put Darius in because, hey, let's try this out. It's, we have to do something. Marcus Williams has fallen off a cliff. Eddie Jackson is a problem both on and off the field. Darius really was one of their last hopes on the year, if we're being honest. So he finished the year last season. Really, it was a career year in almost every single aspect for Darius, which was really exciting for him. You love what you saw out of him. He ended up piling up a ton of different stats on the year, 64 tackles combined for him. He had a forced fumble, that coming on Russell Wilson, 2 interceptions, and he's someone that can find his way around the football. But despite his size, he's only 5'8", 180. He hits like a truck. He is physical. He is not shy. He is not afraid of contact. That's something that goes back to his TCU days, is he plays so much bigger than his size. There are players in the NFL, even just throwing it to a different position. A Miles Boykin, for example. I bring this up all the time. Miles was 6'4". He played like he was 5'11" as a wide receiver. Darius plays like he is got Cam Chancellor build safety, that mega hit guy. Small guys can hit too, all right? I don't like to discount players as much for their size as maybe other people do. And I understand there are limitations, and I don't want to completely gloss over that. But again, if you can play, you can play. And Darius can certainly play. And the fact that he's on the board now for $3.26 million, at least all but, he hasn't officially signed the tender yet. But again, the only way he can play in 2025 is if he actually signs the tender. That is an absolute win for the Ravens. So all quiet on the offer sheet front for Baltimore in Darius Washington. For the Ravens, and you go back to Lamar's situation, for example, a lot of the other conversation about doing all this work to sign a guy to an offer sheet and then just have a team match it in seconds. Remember that conversation back during Lamar's contract where it was, the Falcons didn't want him, and that's crazy, but let's just say the Falcons worked up this offer sheet with Lamar and his team and presented it to the Ravens. The Ravens said, yeah, okay, we're just going to match it. Essentially, it was doing all the work for the Ravens, and that's actually something that Jeff Rebeck noted just when talking about the situation. A lot of fans were wondering, man, that's a pretty low tender. Surprised no teams wanted to actually match that or try to get a deal done. And Jeff said a lot of teams don't like signing these offer sheets because you do all this work and a team can just match it in seconds. And the reason Darius was undrafted was because of the height, weight stuff. Maybe teams just aren't sold on him after one good season. We saw Geno Stone have one good season in Baltimore and turn that into a pretty nice payday in Cincinnati. And he was one of the worst defenders that team had last season. He was one of the worst safeties in the league last season. So, is this just another Baltimore gets the best out of guys? They certainly do. That's a conversation. But you know what? It's Baltimore's game. It is Baltimore's game. I'll admit, I was a little nervous when the Ravens did the right of first refusal. But, maybe the Ravens just had to tap on the market to feel the market for Darius. And now he comes back. He can play. He's someone that has that ball hawk versatility. But as I mentioned, can come up and hit somebody if you really need him to. And that's a part of his game that he likes. He made multiple game-winning plays for Baltimore last season. And they happened early in games, too. It was momentum-shifting plays. That Pittsburgh game, in Baltimore was one of them. And then he had multiple other big plays as well that you could just feel momentum shift. And Darius is that type of player where, he might not rack up all these stats every single game, but he will get his. And he will also have a play that is either counts on the stat sheet, but doesn't actually show the pure impacts. Like Darius will have that forced fumble on Russell Wilson. Doesn't show the impact of the play. I think that play won them the game. Like, he's just a clutch player. He's a fiery guy, and you can see the passion. He works hard. He has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to win. He's a Raven. I just think Darius is a Raven, and I'm really glad this was something that the Ravens and Darius, I guess it wasn't agreed upon, but I'm glad he's back in Baltimore. I'm glad he's back in Baltimore, and hopefully, best case scenario for both Darius and the Ravens now is he has another huge year in 2025. That'll parlay, because that'll be 2 years, 2 straight years of great play from him. He'll parlay that into a big payday, whether that's Baltimore or somewhere else. In Baltimore, either gets Darius back or he goes to another team, and Baltimore gets a comp pick, and it just continues that Ravens cycle that we see every single year. So Darius back in Baltimore, a risky move from Eric DeCosta and the Ravens to not give him draft compensation on that tender. It was right of first refusal, but it turns out to be genius, as no team ends up signing him to an offer sheet. And so Darius all but back in Baltimore in 2025. But you know what? Eric DeCosta can't stop winning. Coming up, we'll be talking about a lot of draft scenarios for Baltimore and why a lot of them do end up with Baltimore coming out with a pretty solid haul, especially in this draft class and the way it's set up. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your pair of controllers, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Diving into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports, College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. And there are so many great options to start playing Xbox on your Fire TV, and it can be a game changer when it comes to your gaming experience. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV locked on to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Ostriker, still talking with you here on this Monday. We are in draft week. It is officially here again. I want to wish everybody a happy draft week. Hopefully everybody had a happy Easter, happy Passover, whatever you celebrate. Hopefully it was a happy holiday weekend for you. We're going to be diving into some draft scenarios for this Ravens team, and why I think, in my opinion, Eric DeCosta just can't stop winning with these, because in nearly every one, Baltimore comes out on top as a clear winner. And so that's what I'm expecting from the Ravens this weekend. Clear winner. I think, first of all, when you look at Baltimore's needs, we've gone over it time and time again on this show. If you're an everydayer, you've certainly heard it before. I think edge, corner, safety, D-line, O-line, they're positionally free. They don't have to pigeonhole themselves into one position. It seems like a lot of people are on the Malachi Starks train. We had Sam and Njoku on the show on Friday. We talked about Andrew Berry's comments on Lamar Jackson. If you haven't looked at that show yet, be sure to go back and watch or listen to that one. But Malachi Starks, he talked about the Ravens and feels like that might be the consensus pick now for Baltimore. And Donovan Izaraku out of Boston College is another, which, hint, hint, we'll get into in our final part of the show for my final mock draft Monday of the 2025 season. But there are so many different ways that they could go. And again, I think a lot of this, here's what I'm going to look at. How does this quarterback class go before 27? There is a realistic possibility that 4 quarterbacks go before 27. There's also a possibility 2 quarterbacks go before 27. And you might be saying, Kevin, that's not that big of a difference. 2 guys versus 4 guys, who cares? It could be. It could be the difference. Who knows? If one of the wide receivers in that Kyle Hamilton draft had fallen to 14, maybe that's because Kyle Hamilton was taken, and it only takes 1, right? So that's a decently big difference, in my opinion, for a Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart, let's say Shedeur Sanders goes in the top 15. Some people are expecting him to fall to Pittsburgh at 21, but let's say he goes in the top 15. Does Pittsburgh take Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders or Jalen Milroe at 21? If Sanders goes in the top 15, obviously he's not falling at 21, but what if Sanders does fall? Then does that push Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe to maybe the last pick in the first round, maybe first pick in the second round? Or if Sanders goes in the top 15, you could have Jackson Dart go to Pittsburgh or Jalen Milroe, and then maybe a team trades up ahead of Baltimore to secure the other guy. And then that will push maybe a Walter Nolan defensive lineman down, or Derrick Harmon, maybe he gets pushed down, like whoever it is, whichever player, Nicky Manwari, like there are a bunch of guys. But I was doing a mock draft, I did one for Locked On. I picked Nicky Manwari there, and I've done a bunch of them. But in that Locked On mock draft, on the board, there were still a lot of guys that I liked. And so this draft, how it's set up, is there's star power at the top, but there isn't like a ton of it. Like, yes, you got your Travis Hunters, your Abdul Carters, et cetera, but then there's a pretty steep drop off in terms of like star top of draft talent. Not that I'm saying there are going to be no stars after those guys. There are plenty of players rounds 1 through 4, in my opinion, that can be immediate starters / even stars in this league. But I'm just talking about your polarizing top of draft guys. There are always that every single season. This year, there are less of those. What there is more of, and this favors the Ravens, what there is more of are those guys that can just be solid for you. Those really high-level contributors, guys that are ready to play. You have that, as I mentioned, through all 4 of the first 4 rounds, definitely through the first 2 days. But I think even sneaking into that 4th round, you could probably find a couple of guys if you're Baltimore that could contribute for you, especially on the defensive line. We know this is a very deep defensive line class. I think they could find a safety. This is a very deep running back class, but I'm not necessarily expecting them to take one unless they really don't trust Rasheen Ali. Offensive line, you can definitely find some guys in the 4th that could make an impact, and obviously all the way up to the 1st there. There's so many ways this could go, but after those first 4 rounds, I'm expecting the Ravens to have one of each of probably a defensive lineman, probably an edge guy, probably anticipate an offensive lineman, then maybe a wild card, right? Maybe it is a corner or a safety in the secondary. I'd probably expect them to take one secondary guy by the time their first 4 picks or by the time the 4th round is over. But I think that adds to the intrigue, and it adds to the way that this draft is set up, where you could take a Malachi Starks in the 1st round and then have a Darius Alexander, who's a defensive lineman, go in the 2nd to you. And you'd feel just as comfortable with that as you probably would with trading back, taking Xavier Watts in the 2nd round, and then having a guy like Jackson or Tate Ratledge or even Landon Jackson. There's so many ways this could go, and that is a good thing for Baltimore. We know Eric DeCosta is going to be wheeling and dealing on the phones. We will see how much he ends up doing. Again, I've done multiple mock drafts. You've been with me every Monday. I do one every single Monday, or I guess Sunday, and then I read it out on Monday. But I've kind of said these past 2 weeks, I've done both a trade up and a trade back, and both of those I've had the Ravens landing in like that 9 to 10 pick range. That feels a little better to me than that 11 pick range, where Eric DeCosta admitted during his pre-draft press conference that, it might be a little difficult to to have all 11 guys make the roster outright. So kind of is what it is there. But then the other thing you got to turn your attention to is Mark Andrews. We've talked about it. Eric DeCosta during the pre-draft press conference, unsettling is the wrong word. I just say very eerie comments on the future of Mark Andrews. There's a lot of smoke around it. Who knows if that actually leads to anything? Mike Garafolo, we talked about this last week, reported that Mark Andrews was available at the start of the new league year, which isn't a surprise, but the Ravens just didn't get what they wanted. Ian Rapoport said it wouldn't shock him if, based off all the DeCosta comments, the team came through and offered an offer that the Ravens couldn't refuse, that they would take it. And I 100% believe that is exactly what they should do. But don't trade him just to trade him. If they're holding out for a day 2 pick, that's what I would do. Because I think having Mark Andrews on your roster for 1 year, even if the salary, look, it's a lot, but he still is a top 5 tight end in my opinion. I know there's a lot of controversy around Mark right now, especially after the Buffalo game, and I get it. His playoff performances have not lived up to his regular season, at least for the most part over the course of his career. But that doesn't take away from the player he is. Yes, they have Isaiah Likely waiting in the wings, and they'd be good if Mark were to get traded. It'd still be a loss for them. I don't want to say, it wouldn't be, because it would be. but you have a guy that can step up. You get probably an extra top 100 pick. That is worth it. But I think he leaves for a 4th-round comp pick anyway in the offseason next year, and I think it's worth having his production for one more year. If you're just going to get a 4th anyway, you're going to get the 4th either way. I mean, I'd rather just have him for one more year if that's the case. But again, if a team like the Chargers doesn't get Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland, and that was their big plan, they might turn around to Baltimore and say, hey, I know we weren't really offering you what you wanted before, but okay, here's that pick you wanted. And then the Ravens will say, okay, and that works out. Eric DeCosta talked about how for Hollywood Brown, that deal was not announced until draft night. It was done on Monday, but no one could hear about it. So we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But regardless, the Ravens have needs. I'm not saying they don't have any needs, but they don't have this big, massive need that overshadows everything that they absolutely need to take in the first round. They will take best player available. They will take the guy who's highest on their board. They did it last year with Nate Wiggins. He was their number 1 corner on the board. And look, usually more often than not, it's not perfect, but usually more often than not, that does work out for Baltimore. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll dive into my final 2025 mock draft Monday. Man, crazy to say that. Final mock draft Monday of 2025. We'll also dive into a couple of watcher, listener mock drafts as well. So be sure to stay tuned. We got plenty coming away on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at our draft prospects to pick one guy that stands apart, the guy we believe showcased the strength and power needed to push the Ravens forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut Player of the Week is Donovan Iziraku out of Boston College. Now, for me, edge is a position in need for Baltimore. It definitely is. Iziraku is a heavy-duty player. The production, you want to look at the tape, everything is there. It all adds up for Donovan Iziraku. He's someone that, he has the motor. He's relentless. He's a rugged player, and he conquers everybody he goes up against, at least most guys he goes up against. He's a very confident player as well, and I think for the Ravens, if they were to dream big in this draft, which they're certainly going to, they should go big with Donovan Iziraku. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. That's exactly what I think Donovan Iziraku can do here. It's clear to their Player of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostriker still here with you. Didn't go anywhere. We're talking Ravens football here. By the way, always appreciate everybody who tunes in, watches, listens to the show, whether you are an everydayer, a first-time listener, or somewhere in the middle. Thank you so much for all of your support. You can tell a friend, tell a family member about us as well. If you have anybody who wants daily Ravens coverage, wants the Ravens perspective on something, we're here for them and we're here for you on Locked On Ravens. So again, appreciate everybody. And we have so much draft content coming your way. I really can't say it enough. The draft is one of my favorite times of the year, one of my favorite times of the offseason, obviously, as well. It's one of those times that, you prepare for months, years, and you come and all these different guys will have their NFL dreams realized, which, again, so many other cool storylines in that as well. The Ravens, by the way, do a really good job of telling those stories, especially those first phone calls with John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta, Isaac Newsom, Steve Bisciotti. So really looking forward to that as well. But not looking forward to this being the final mock draft Monday of 2025. It's always bittersweet, definitely more sweet than bitter because I'm excited the draft is actually here. But, it's always fun prepping for the draft, going through all these different scenarios, having the controversy of mock drafts people like and mock drafts people don't like. So thought, obviously, as I do every year, if you've been with me on Locked On Ravens for years, you know this, but every year, my final mock draft Monday is, a realistic option, and I feel like could actually happen. And then we do a couple more over the rest of the week. And then on Thursday, we'll get to my final predictions for the Ravens in this 2025 draft. So let's dive into it here. First up, 27. I took Donovan Iziraku, the Boston College edge rusher. I think, to me, Donovan Iziraku has a super high ceiling. The production obviously is there in college. I know a lot of people are kind of comparing Iziraku to a Shamar Stewart type in terms of opposites, where Shamar Stewart is someone who has all the athletic traits, all the athletic tools, but there wasn't really a lot of college production. Where you look at college production for Donovan Iziraku, he didn't really have, it was up and down. Started off Boston College as a freshman in 2021, 3 sacks. Next year, he had 8.5. Then he fell down to 2. And then 2024, big breakout year, 16.5 sacks for Donovan Iziraku, 21 tackles for loss, just unbelievable. And those numbers, both in sacks and tackles for loss, led the conference for Donovan Iziraku in 2024. So, look, I know a lot of people wonder, hey, is it a one-year wonder? Is that what Donovan Iziraku is? But I think he has, again, he's 6'2", 237. So when you look at kind of what he brings to the table for Baltimore, I really see him having a big impact on whatever team he goes to. And there's been a lot of buzz that he could go maybe far beyond 27 in terms of him getting taken maybe in the late teens, early 20s. I mean, his play strength is a little bit worrisome, but I feel like as he can add weight and especially be in the Ravens strength and conditioning program, early downs are probably where he struggles the most. But I think you have Tavius Robinson who can kind of fill in. I think Iziraku fits into Baltimore's personnel where Iziraku doesn't have to be an early down player early in his career, especially on obvious rundowns. You have Tavius Robinson for that. You'll probably get a couple of other solid run defenders in this class as well. Adafe Owe can do something for you there too. Kyle Van Noy has been very violent, setting the edge in his time in Baltimore. I think you can play to Iziraku's strengths, and I think that's really important when it comes to the Ravens and what they need in this particular class. So we know that edge, they need a guy there. Can Iziraku turn into that? I think he has the potential to, but right now they don't have that. And if he falls to 27, feel pretty decent that could be their pick. So I want him at 27. Then in the second round, Mike Malum out of West Virginia, number 59 offensive lineman there. Versatility, the Ravens need offensive line depth, and I think that Baltimore, you can plug and play Wyatt in here if you want. Day one, whether that is for Andrew Voorhees or Daniel Falele. I am obviously not sold on Baltimore's guard position, but we can see how that competition plays out. Maybe Voorhees does win. Maybe Falele does win. But I think adding high-level competition because you just don't know, plus offensive line depth is uber important anyway, and I think that Malum can be a piece for you for the long term. Dorian Strong, number 91, was my third-round pick out of Virginia Tech. Ty Felton, Maryland wide receiver at 129 in round 4. Second round 4 pick at 136 was R.J. Mickens, safety out of Clemson. 176, round 5, Anais Peebles, the Virginia Tech defensive lineman. Jay Higgins, linebacker from Iowa, was my round 6 pick at 183. Second round 6 pick at 203 was Ty Robinson, Nebraska D lineman. Round 6 to 10 was Harlem Pierce, offensive lineman from Rutgers. 212, Andreas Borgalis, the Miami kicker, and then Gavin Bartholomew, Pittsburgh, in my round 7 selection at 243. So there might not be a lot of flashy names in this one. Ty Felton certainly is someone who Maryland ties there, super explosive player, and we know the Ravens have passed up on a couple of good Maryland wide receivers in recent seasons, so maybe they reverse that trend here. Maybe Ty Felton could be the next big one there. But overall, again, not a flashy draft, but I think a solid one. And the Ravens don't even have to go super flashy in this draft. Just get solid contributors. Like, that's what I think Iziraku can be, is what I think Wyatt Malum can be as well. And even a guy like Dorian Strong, who do the Ravens need a top corner right now? No. But I think having that corner depth is super important, even with guys like TJ Tampa waiting in the wings. So let's get to a couple listener/watcher mock drafts. Again, I really appreciate everybody who has done these over the course of mock draft season. They're always fun to do. The mock draft simulator gives you some crazy stuff sometimes too, which is just always fun to look at. But let's get one in here from Ravens Backs, who says, low 5-rounder. I know Ravens will never take a wide receiver and running back in the first 5 rounds, but getting Starks and JT in the first 2 rounds would be a win-win. So at 27, Malachi Starks, Georgia safety. At 59, JT Tuimoloau, the edge out of Ohio State. 91, Charles Grant, William & Mary, offensive lineman. Dante Thornton, Tennessee wide receiver. At 129, Deion Walker, defensive lineman from Texas at 136. And Jordan James, running back from Oregon at 176. I don't know. I mean, look, the Ravens aren't sold on Rasheen Ali. I can see them spending a 176 on a running back. It's not completely out of the question. I wouldn't bet on it. If I'm on FanDuel, I probably wouldn't put that in. But hey, you know what? Anything can happen there. Charles Grant seems to be one of the more, I don't want to say telegraphed picks, but seems like there is interest for him on the Ravens side of things, and would not be shocked whatsoever if they end up doing like double defense and kind of like what Ravens backs did here, like double defense, and then you take Charles Grant at 91. I'm not sure he'll fall to 129, but feels like that could be their third round pick, someone who has that swing tackle versatility. At least you can experiment with that. So I like this draft a lot. Malachi Starks, again, seems to be like, this feels realistic to me. Like, I don't know if Malachi falls. Like, I think Nicky Minwari will be the first safety off the board. I think that makes Malachi Starks an option to fall to you at 27. Getting JT in the second round would be awesome. Charles Grant feels realistic in the third. Get speed with Dante Thornton in the fourth. Deion Walker is a behemoth, and they just lost the behemoth in Michael Pierce. And then again, Jordan James doesn't feel as crazy as maybe people think it might be. So this actually, you know what? Last week of mock drafts, this might be one of my favorite ones in terms of realisticness I've seen for Baltimore. We'll see how that all plays out, though. Let's get to one more here from Tremor Pulse, who has the Ravens taking James Pierce, Tennessee at 27. Edge guy, Alfred Collins, D lineman from Texas at 59. Tate Ratledge, guard from Georgia at 91. Billy Bowman Jr., safety from Oklahoma at 129. Noah Williams, California corner at 136. Dante Thornton, Tennessee wide receiver at 176. Jack Nelson, Wisconsin tackle at 183. Teddy Buchanan, California linebacker at 203. Ben Sauls, kicker from Pittsburgh at 210. Howard Cross, the third defensive lineman from Notre Dame at 212. And Montrell Johnson Jr., Florida running back at 243. James Pierce has the potential, man. I love James Pierce in terms of his on-field fit. And off the field, I feel like Baltimore can make it work. I feel like we had Nick Bumgardner, athletic draft expert, on the show a couple weeks ago. He said Baltimore's a mature organization. He could be a spot that James Pierce could thrive in, and I 100% agree. Alfred Collins, one of the many great defensive linemen. I'm curious what defensive linemen were available at this spot, because there are a couple others I like, but Collins is still a good one. Tate Ratledge, I think, has second-round value. Getting him at 91 is great value. Billy Bowman has range. There's a lot of tackling stuff with him, but, is a pure deep guy, certainly can make an impact. I like this draft a lot. Again, Dante Thornton feels like a pick that the Ravens can make as well. So, man, crazy to think that we are in draft week, just a couple of days away. We'll be covering the draft all week, covering it through the draft as well. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button here in video form, and follow along and subscribe here in audio form if you want more daily Ravens coverage. We'll be here for you all week, as we always are, plus have all that bonus draft content coming your way. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more Ravens content for you, covering all the storylines leading into Thursday's night one. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.